Two children are inseparable. They're torn apart by an accident. Late in life, they meet again. And then we're taken into a parallel world where they meet in middle age and have a passionate affair. Then another in which they marry young but confront unhappiness. They are Ivy and Abe, and in Elizabeth Enfield's novel, each of these stories reveals a part of their character, as if all of us aren't just who we are here and now, but are always carrying with us the weight of the oldest question of all: what if? Welcome. In this book, we're reminded that life and your fate can change in the blink of an eye. Do you think of that as being reassuring or alarming?
I think it's both, but I think it's one of those tantalising thoughts that people have a lot, that sort of, what if I'd done this and what if I'd done that? And I think the thought is very alarming, especially if you've based your whole life or you've lived a whole life dependent on one route that you've gone down. But I actually think the exploration of it, which I've tried to do in the book, is less alarming, because I think that life, there are a lot of themes to the book, not just the issue of the relationship between the two people, but I think life has a habit of turning out as it's going to turn out, and those paths not taken have a sort of way of rejoining almost, so that you can look back and think, oh, if I hadn't done that, my life might have been very different. But very often it's not. It's sort of similar.
Well, that is the reassuring answer. What's interesting about Ivy and Abe, of course, the couple that we follow and then go backwards with in this book, is that it's not so much what they have done, decisions they've made, it's about things that have happened that are beyond their control. An accident, for example, when they're children, that throws them apart. And a lot of it is accidental. So they're not to blame, or, you know, it's not something they've done that's produced good or bad, it's just stuff that's happened.
Yeah, well, I tried to work in that there's something else in that there are two things in the book. That Abe's life, so the two people have different things going on in their lives, and Abe's life, as you said, is there's an accident which happens in each of his parallel lives, and it always has a different effect. So it's a completely random accident. Whenever it happens, the effect of that accident plays out differently. And against that, I wanted something that was more sort of set in the stars, if you like. So Ivy has something which is, when I was writing it, I was thinking, what can she have that is just almost immutable, that is not going to suffer the same random effects? And so she has something in her genes, which also plays out, which I don't want to you know, give too much away.
No.
But that was my thing of, you know, what can you have in your life that is absolutely set that you can't affect? And that seemed to me like it's something that you're born with, you know, it's your cards are marked, your genetic card is marked, and that is going to play out no matter what happens really in the rest of the world, the way that it will.
We don't want to give too much away, but we can say that we see them operating in parallel worlds. I mean, they're children. Then they meet when they're much, much older and elderly, really. And then there are two other kind of episodes when they're in midlife, and we see these things almost acting simultaneously. It's inevitable when this book is reviewed that people will look back to that film, Sliding Doors, and say, oh, it's, you know, that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. People will remember that movie.
As you say, Ivy and Abe meet again and again, and it's like sliding doors, but not in that, it's not that same time that might have gone differently. It's at different times of their lives. They're children, they're in their 70s, they're in their 60s, they're in their 50s, 40s, 30s, you know, we go right through. And within those chapters, we have a little bit of background and a little of information. So we know what that particular life to date, how it's been slightly different than it was to another version.
Well, you're writing a fascinating story because it's absorbing, you know, what will happen in this circumstance and how does it compare with what's happened before or what is to come. Were you conscious at all when you were writing the story and when as the novel developed, that you wanted to say something about the nature of life or our own experiences or how we look at our emotional lives, or were you just saying, I want to tell a good story?
Both. I think you know, one of the premises of this novel was I'd gathered a lot of stories and of people who'd had relationships that they had thought maybe if I'd met someone at another time it might have played out differently. So the circumstances of their life at that particular time had affected a particular relationship. And B, that almost everyone, I suppose, especially as they reach the end of their lives, and this starts at the end of Ivy and Abe's lives, has a sort of slight, not really a yearning, but a wistfulness. And not even, I don't mean a sort of deep, sad wistfulness, but just a sort of slight nostalgic, you know, I wonder what might have happened.
A curiosity, a natural curiosity.
Yeah, a natural curiosity. What if I hadn't done that? And I think generally people think I'm glad that I didn't because my life's turned out fine.
I'm interested in the names, Ivy and Abe, both very simple and almost very intimate. You know, my friends Ivy and Abe, you can think of them. There's nothing artificial about them. How did you, it's a kind of question readers always want to know, how did you come to Ivy and Abe?
Well, I started actually, and there are sort of traces of this still in the book, I started with Robert and Eleanor because I wanted names that I could change and give a variation of. And then when I finished the book, I decided it was too confusing, and I just wanted names that were easily recognisable, not unusual, not how do you spell that, but also unusual so that each time we met them, it was obvious that it was them. It wasn't another Tom, Dick or Harry or Sarah or Kate. It was like, oh, it's Ivy. And they actually, on the page, they look nice together. They look sort of right. I mean, I like the way that words look on a page. I love the way they look on the cover of the book.
Well, you talk about the cover. It's interesting because you've got their names on Scrabble tiles, and there's a heart on another tile. And it's a lovely idea because we all know how infuriating and how wonderful that game is according to how the tiles fall.
Exactly.
And it's a lovely analogy for the story, really.
Exactly, and you can, you know, if you were playing Scrabble, you know, they might land anywhere on the board, they might repeat themselves on the board, so it is a great sort of metaphor for what the book is about.
I come back to the idea of alternative lives, which were always waiting out there for us, and we could have taken. How did the idea come to you?
It came, I mean, I'd love to say there was a eureka moment, but there wasn't. It came, I sort of am constantly collecting people's stories, so from reading the paper, from listening to the radio, listening to television, talking to people, and I sort of ended up with this collection of stories, which was the sort of theme running through them all was, you know, is there a right person or a right time?
Well, you've written a lot of short stories, so your mind, in a way, you know, for some years, has been used to that idea of taking a lovely little episode and constructing a beautifully chiselled story. And this book, it seems to me, has got a lot of that skill in it, that you put a lot of these things together and say, well, hang on a minute, there is a big mosaic here which hangs together.
Yeah, it was lovely to write from that point of view because it did feel much more like, initially I'm writing a series of short stories, but there is a thread of a lifetime and of similar circumstances which runs through them all. But I was almost able to let the characters live their life at a particular moment without worrying about the before or after, and then think about that afterwards.
Elizabeth Enfield, author of Ivy and Abe, thanks very much.
Thank you.